Uh, Welcome to another session of the Eco Hour. When we talk actually of how a city manages its water or its energy resources and its piling mounds of waste, we at once think of the numbers and how in the last, say, 20 to maybe 25 years, we have had a dramatic change in the demographics as well as of the contours of population and the spread of the city itself. If you take Bangalore city, it's a continental city, and so unlike coastal cities, it grows on all directions. We have today, if you look at the city map, it'll sound like it is Germany, it'll look like it is Germany. And we have had a greater density to the southwest and the south of Bangalore, as well as to the east, not as much to the north of Bangalore. If you take the ridge of Bangalore, culminating somewhere where you have got Hotel Ashok and Hotel Windsor Manor and such, you will find three watersheds that spread down toward the south, the west, and the north of Bangalore. Now, what has happened to Bangalore is this. In 1980, we were only 2 million people that the city hosted.
Right.
We have moved from there to about 11 million, about 3 million of which is floating population. Bangalore has always been a city which has had a higher floating population than most of the cities in India.
Right.
The other is that the water demand has grown from a manageable 180 million liters in 1980 to about 1,400 million liters today. What we have not done in the process is understand what we need to do to reuse or to recycle or to use the wastewater.
Right.
The popular saying goes, yes.
So I was saying, like, if, yes, reuse, recycle is fine. Has there been any attempt by the utility that's servicing Bangalore, to particularly the water utility, to look at the demand side management even before going to the recycle and reuse aspects?
Actually, sad to say this, but this has been spoken about from at least 1999 or 2000. Yeah. There are a few of these serious custodians of the city or people who meant well for the city who have spoken about it, but there has not been any move.
Yes.
Today we have, after all these years, we have got only 150 million liters of sewage treatment capacity, which is not even 10%, shall we say, of the total demand or the discharge of water that happens in the city.
Because that's something I see, we do, because recycling and reuse is, of course, is a big, lot of talk happens. But even before we do that, there's a lot of leakage even in this water supply system. So starting from leakage, I see the faucets, the taps, really, throwing water at such high pressure and flows. Yeah. There's so much potential in the apartment buildings to save the water that we already have. And just we talk in megawatts for the energy, megaliters we start with. So that's something I see as a big gap. Absolutely. What do you think?
Actually, what you have said is that, in a sense, you're saying, let us not depend on what the government does as far as infrastructure goes. Right. Let us see what we can do in our own communities and at our individual homes.
Exactly.
So there are two sets of interventions beyond the government that you are suggesting.
Yes.
To me, there is only one single word for this.
Right.
Decentralize. If there is a way we can think inside our minds that we are not going to depend on any centralized sources of energy or of water.
Correct.
And if we said to ourselves, therefore, that we will do what you suggested, demand side management, in ways that we have efficient taps and fixtures, we move into showers which are under 9 liters per minute of flow, and then we see what we do to harvest rainwater and so on.
That's right. So I feel this, decentralized. So when you come to decentralized engagement at the community level becomes very important. And when you start the engagement process, I strongly feel that starting at that water efficiency level, some interventions and actions that individually apartment owners, the managers of the apartment buildings can take, and that starts the engagement process, which can then lead to the bigger, complicated or more technological solutions like recycled water, etc.
Absolutely. In fact, one of our trustees at the Alt.Tech Foundation, Padhu Padmanabhan, who has been a doyen of the energy sector, said very famously and memorably recently to me, he says energy and water efficiency is everybody's business.
Absolutely.
So if you as a consumer
Correct.
you as an apartment entity,
Yes.
you as a community in a neighborhood,
Correct.
and then of course the people who are supplying water or energy, they all got together
Yes.
and each gave ideas to the other
Exactly.
in ways that we brought such efficiencies. I think we will be
Yeah.
able to manage this into
That's
the next
right.
20 years.
And then when you look at another completely just looks unrelated problem, is that you have these young engineers coming out of the institutions, and I hear many of them talk about, we are looking for something meaningful to do, something we understand that, we can see around ourselves, the sustainability is an issue, but they feel helpless. So if we were to actually skill them up,
Absolutely.
to just train, to go and audit these apartment buildings, for example, right? And then, so they could, and of course, what's also I find in many forums, that residential welfare associations who manage these apartments, they are conversing, they're trying to share this information in random bits and pieces. However, if they were to be supplied with a set of skilled people who can go and do a proper auditing and give them a proper report about, here are your hotspots, where you could be wasting a lot of water, energy, and how you manage your waste, and starting, that becomes a starting point, and a very engagement, like a very good way to engage with the residents as
You
well.
couldn't have said it better. Are you suggesting, therefore, that some kind of a catalyzing force or an agency
That's
which
right.
educates people
Yes.
and brings them together on what they need to be doing
Yeah,
has to
exactly.
be,
That's right.
nurtured.
And if you can create that as a job potential, or even if people are trained on that, and they could be doing it as a freelancing business on the side, just to feel that there is a meaningful work life they have got, apart
Yes.
from the normal jobs they've got. Because the fact of the matter is, it does require a bit of technical analysis to give it more evidence based to what someone is suggesting. So that itself becomes an engaging process, and people become more clearer, and they get more clarity on why they need to act on certain things.
I know you're very good, Bhakti, at this business of methodology and breaking down for
Yes.
analysis. How do you think a young man, could be an engineer,
Yeah.
could be a graduate,
Yes.
who is willing to learn this and see if he can make a living out of it,
Yes.
comes to you, what would you do to him, to this process?
Very simple, because I must say I have done this in my previous career in Sydney, for example, because in Sydney I was very much involved with a large demand side management program which Sydney Water undertook. Imagine a water utility taking on a huge job of actually investing money into their customers to help them save water, whereas it's selling water. Sounds counterintuitive, right?
Absolutely.
But if you actually make a business case of actually utilities spending money to help their customers save water, was actually making a business case, was helping them defer a lot of capital infrastructure, and that's why they were investing. So that gave me an exposure into how much potential there can be within a city when what you could do is an end use analysis, right? So then boiling it down to a single apartment, what we can train the engineers to do is to go and do what we call as a water audit. So auditing the common areas, auditing the apartments, and you can also go to the extent of using data loggers. Look at the consumption profile, and that starts to give and share it with the residents to see, here are your leakages, here are your
You
high
said
usage.
that while it is counterintuitive
Yes.
for a water supplying agency to actually be talking about saving water,
Yes.
you are saying that the business case is about deferring or saving on
Yes.
capital expenditure.
Absolutely.
Is there a way you can do some kind of a very quick survey and map
Yep.
of the cost of capital expenditure that Bangalore City would save
Oh, yes.
if they went with some things that you are talking about
absolutely.
as water audits and solutions?
Exactly, but of course that's at the utility level. So what we are talking about is you
That's
can
right.
certainly do things at an organizational level.
The reason I am saying
Yes.
this is,
Yes.
if you did some such, even if it is back of envelope kind
Yes.
of economics, if you did that, the consumer you are talking to will suddenly have his eyebrows
Yes,
rising.
absolutely. We
He
can
is
do
going
that.
to say, hey, if this is the sort of money that the city will save, let me see what I can do
Yeah.
as my bit.
Correct. And so what I'm saying is that's one thing we can do at a city level, which utilities can be looking at. But let's even look at, because feeling helpless, the government, depending on the government, let's look at what can be done at that apartment level, at my own flat level, right? So there is a lot you can do, and that's just with water. then you look at the energy part, look at the waste management part, and that way you are actually doing a more informed interventions, and that has more chances of success than these educational things flying around. You should segregate waste, and there's no consistent way of informing the resident. And people want information. People, if you're informing them and educating them, there's no reason why they wouldn't act, because it's going to also save them tangible money.
In a sense, what you're saying is, let's stop all the, general environment talk. Let us see how we can get a few hundreds of people, probably.
Exactly, yes.
To be trained to make such analysis of gaps as well as of solutions that can emerge.
Absolutely.
I think you should say a little more about what such a process would be
looking like. So as I said, the training that I'm conceptualizing, and once it's done, the way it will be rolled out is it will get the skill, any person with a bit of a technical background who is able to deal with analysis and things, to come 4 hours on a weekend, get trained on stage 1 to just do water audits, and look at providing a hotspot report.
And what would be a water audit?
So water audit would be involve, as I say, walk through an apartment, and that would, once they are trained on that, we send them away to an apartment building, which who will be participating in the program, to actually do a proper audit using the training that we have given them, right?
And what distinguishes that process of training?
What that does is it actually helps to break down by end use, by taking account of what are the end users that are using water, what kind of appliance it is, how efficient it is, what's the flow rate, how much usage that happens, what's the frequency of usage. So you make all these assumptions and validate them by asking people, and come to a point where you can provide to the apartment, here are your water, what's your water consumption profile looking like, and also therefore where are your opportunities for saving water and money. And same thing you can do for the energy as well. So having given them the hotspot report, then the next stage is, how do you identify the solutions? How much would it cost? So that way the apartment has a roadmap about, here are my problems, which has tangible savings that can be made in terms of money, in terms of water, in terms of resources, as well as here is a set of solutions clearly laid out, and it's up to them that they can implement it as they want. They could also use the trained person's help to be guided by who are the service providers to approach, what contracts to make.
Right.
But that's up to them. But at the minimum, you can provide them the reports so that they have that guidance, a roadmap to making their apartment sustainable, and that will also drive the behavior change slowly.
Where do you see potential? You see, we have about 5,000 to about 6,000 apartments, depending on who gives you the statistic.
Yep.
Even if I were to take, let us say, about 3 people to it, we are talking of about 2 million people who are staying here.
That's right.
Approximately. Now, if I got 2 million people staying only in apartments, which is a higher density therefore, how would you train enough auditors, shall we say,
that's a good
or
question.
assessors,
Yes.
in a way that they would want to go to these places and help those people with information and then to make informed decisions?
Yes.
What would be your strategy?
Okay, so the way I'm looking at it is to first, do a face-to-face, a batch of trainers, about 15 people trained, and they'll be going and doing the actual application as well. And once we know that we've refined that training with this first batch, there are 2 ways you could do it. You could either create a train the trainer program, that's one, and also provide an online, make this training available online with enough all the resources provided, for downloading and all, so that then that can be scaled at a faster rate, the training program. And of course you also have a support, for those who are taking the online training, to have a support about the tutor or whoever
There
is
is always a risk when we talk about the domino impact and speeding up the process.
Sure.
The effectiveness of learning, is never very high.
Yes.
So you're not talking of a combination of 2 things. One is that I get people who will be trained, who go and become auditors or assessors themselves.
Exactly. Yep.
The other is where you're hoping to find people who are competent
Yes.
in communications
Yes.
and being able to present, etc., and then to train.
Yeah.
So you're saying I will find another bunch of people who will be trained to become trainers.
Trainer. That's an option. I mean, we should explore that. We can explore that because it allows you to continue to do face-to-face
Yeah.
training and spread it. And of course, because nowadays online training has become very common. There's many platforms available to do that.
Yeah.
So that would be a more efficient way of doing it. But we can also back it up with a face-to-face support
Right.
if and when those trainees
Yeah.
needed it.
If I may, in conclusion, as
Yes.
the last set of lines go, you are effectively saying that we need to hotspot the city, especially its residential segments, whether it's apartments, and then there would be, of course,
And,
the
yeah.
individual homes or
Correct.
communities. There are, of course, layouts and
Yes,
such where there are
absolutely.
individual homes,
Yes.
and maybe they're willing to listen.
Correct.
So you are saying, therefore, your large target, your primary targets would be resident welfare associations
Yes.
and societies, residential
Correct.
societies.
We start with that,
Yeah.
and then once we know we have developed a program for that, then it's very easy to modify the same program for, say, the next set of commercial office buildings, right?
Absolutely.
Hospitals, hotels.
Or
so
even
you can
industry.
Exactly. So you can then
Yeah.
target
I
individual
was talking to
segments.
someone yesterday who represents 6,000 small units,
Right.
or what are called SMEs,
Okay.
in one large industrial estate to the north of Bangalore.
All right. Okay.
He was president for 10 years.
Right.
And when I was talking to him about this in passing, he says, look, I would be interested in getting some 10, 20 people,
Okay.
the SME
Yes,
CEOs,
yes.
to listen to you because
Yeah.
they have the same
Yeah.
challenges of water, not at the drinking level,
Yes.
but at industrial use level.
Yeah,
That's
there's
higher.
Exactly,
Quantum
and there's
is
many
higher.
different ways you can tackle that. So I think, so mainly what I'm saying is, I hear a lot of, even Bangalore has put this regulation about putting a sewage treatment plant, of course, for the treatment of the wastewater and potentially reuse. But yes, let's also look at the simple stuff which is going to save a lot of water before you start putting this big infrastructure for reusing and recycling. And otherwise, even the reuse recycling has to be used in an efficient way. So efficiency is, I feel, very neglected, and that itself can recover the water that you're already wasting at the moment.
Great. So effectively, I think you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying let's stop the talking
Yeah,
and let's
get to do it.
start hot spotting.
Yes,
You know?
hot spotting. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Great. Thanks. Thank you.
So we know at about 17 minutes, that will be
Good. That will be.
You didn't want it to be more.
No, I'm asking.
No, that I'm saying.